Justice Democrat Cori Bush has defeated 19-year incumbent Representative Lacy Clay. Clay's family has actually represented Missouri's 1st district, that's the St. Louis area, for more than 50 years. So this is an important upset, a stunning upset, and an upset that luckily led to a speech like the one you're about to listen to.
We've been called radicals, terrorists. We've been dismissed as an impossible fringe movement. That's what they called us. But now we are a multiracial, multi-ethnic, multi-generational, multi-faith mass movement, united in demanding change, in demanding accountability, in demanding that our police, our government, our country recognize that Black lives do indeed matter. And that these are not just words or symbolic gestures, but with concrete actions, and we will measure those with our outcomes.
This is Cori Bush's now 2nd time running for that congressional seat. The 1st time, as many know, she lost, but that didn't deter her in any way. She decided to run again, and luckily she won. And this is big news. Bush is someone who made a big name for herself as one of the leaders of the 2014 Ferguson protests. She had a difficult past. She was homeless, so she understands the economic instability and inequality of this country. And having her represent the progressive interests of this country is so incredibly important. Now, Clay dominated Bush among mail-in and absentee ballots, leading some outlets to prematurely call the race. But Bush actually surged back with a commanding election day lead, narrowly topping Clay by 3 points when all were counted. Now, Bush ran for the same seat in 2018. And just to give you a sense of what the situation was like just 2 years ago, she lost by 20 points back then. But again, she didn't give up. And that's why I love this story. I love it on so many different counts. Considering what she went through in her past and how she rose up. She ran for that congressional seat 2 years ago. And even though she lost by 20 points, she's like, I'm not gonna quit, I'm not gonna stop, I'm going for it. And she certainly did. Now, I love this tweet that she also shared after her stunning upset. She tweeted Bernie Sanders's quote or his campaign slogan, "Not me, us." And I also want to note that the narrative among centrist Democrats was that when Jamal Bowman won, for instance, against Eliot Engel, they called it a fluke, right? I mean, they wanted to really undermine how big a deal that win was. They said, it was because of Eliot Engel's hot mic moment. It's because of the fact that Eliot Engel didn't spend enough time in that district. But after Bowman's win, one Democrat anonymously told the New York Post this: New York voters want demographic changes in the House. They don't want old white guys who don't do anything. Not only old white guys, but old white guys who only work when they're up for re-election. People are punishing these kinds of lawmakers. If you're old, white, and lazy, you're going to get kicked out. But the reason why I have an issue with that framing is because it intentionally and purposely leaves out what Cori Bush represents. She's not merely someone who's gonna be tokenized, right? And someone who has the aesthetics of the elite class. What she represents is the working class. People are looking for the right message to represent them, and Cori Bush certainly has that. As The Intercept reported, Clay, however, is not old. He just turned 64 years old, white or lazy. Clay did not remotely take Bush for granted, launching a full-scale negative campaign to try to take her down, and has been focused on her as a threat since her loss to him in 2018. He's a fixture of the community because he and his father, Bill Clay Sr., a civil rights activist and co-founder of the Congressional Black Caucus, have continuously held the seat since the 1960s. So again, this is not an issue of race in this congressional district. This was an issue of working people who were not being represented. They weren't being represented when it came to their economic interests or when it came to issues surrounding justice. And one final thing, John, that I wanted to bring up, Clay's defeat, as Ryan Grimm writes in The Intercept, is also ominous for incumbent Democrats as he was hammered at home by an outside anti-monopoly group for his work with the financial industry to undo an Obama-era piece of Wall Street reform. So that's what this is about. And again, Cori Bush was an excellent candidate. She's an excellent progressive, and I couldn't be happier that she won.
It's not that there can't be multiple reasons that certain incumbents are finally losing, or that incumbents in general are finally losing. There could be multiple reasons for that. But it is amazing the lengths to which that some of these anonymous Democrats will go to deny that policy or ideology has literally anything to do with it. The idea that the candidates can be putting forth bold new ideas, that those ideas can be communicated accurately to voters, that voters can look at their circumstances economically, environmentally, and all of that, and have a preference for something new, and then vote accordingly, seems like the most obvious thing in the world. But how often have you actually heard that being listed as the reason for any of these people losing, whether it's Clay or Engel or Crowley or whoever? It's always something else. It's always demographic, or it's always just randomly hating on old white guys or something like that. No, maybe look for the constant across all of these candidacies. It is generally profiling, or I should say highlighting, certain big policy ideas and focusing on it. That's something that's reproducible, and it will be reproduced. I guess it's in our interest for them to not learn that lesson, but they sure seem resistant to doing so.
Right, and I look, that denial in their minds helps to maintain their own financial interests, which is why they try to minimize how Americans are really feeling right now about inequality and injustice. And I also want to note that Cori Bush was elected on the same day that voters in Missouri supported an expansion of Medicaid. So again, it goes back to ideology, it goes back to policy, and don't let anyone either in the centrist Democratic group or in mainstream media tell you otherwise. This really is about policy and ideology. One other thing I do want to bring back is a tweet that didn't age so well. It's from July of 2019 when a Fox News reporter spoke to an anonymous Democrat. And here is what the Democrat said. No one is afraid of those nerds, in reference to Justice Democrats. They don't have the ability to primary anyone. Oops.
Oops. I wish I could know who it was. I probably wouldn't know who that is, but wouldn't it be great if it was someone we knew and if they finally got identified?
Wouldn't it be great if they weren't if they didn't say they weren't afraid while going anonymous and making that statement, right? Like, oh, we're not afraid. I mean, I'm not gonna reveal what my identity is or anything, but we're not afraid of those nerds.
Yeah, sometimes I'll send someone a letter that tells them to say that to my face. So stupid. By the way, also, let's just quickly acknowledge, and I'm sure that Cenk did in his video because I know he did a live video immediately after it was announced, but the principle that he has been continually repeating on the show is, it is great if in your first race you can win it. It's great and probably very rare. But that second race, after people have gotten to know you and after you've started to learn how to put a campaign together and you've got the ground team and all of that, can be much more successful. And we're now in the time of the second race for many of these new candidates. And she's like the perfect example of it. She's someone who came into politics the right way through activism in something that's very important to people, that she ran a great race and then learned from the experience and took those lessons and actually won 2 years later. I think it's a great example that hopefully we'll see repeated, especially across many of, I know it's been difficult that this election so far, there's been some great congressional primary candidates that unfortunately didn't quite make it. Jessica Cisneros, Nabila Islam, and a number of others, by the way, that's just a couple. And who knows, maybe in 2 years, maybe in 4, some of those will be congresspeople.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.